Hi, my name is Linda Dinell. I met Dorian in the early 90s. We were together for about 10 years. The entirety of our relationship was riddled with abuse. He always said to me, I just want you to be the best version of yourself that you can be. But over time, those helpful critiques turned into sharp criticisms. He was 26 when we met. He had a college education. I did not. He had a very good job. I did not. Eventually, I convinced myself that the silent treatment and the cursing and the name calling and the yelling and the fits of just unbelievable jealousy weren't that bad. When it would happen, he would always say to me, "You push my buttons. You know exactly how to push my buttons." I wanted to believe that. And I told myself that it wasn't like he was putting his hands on me. And that was true until it wasn't. That was true until the day that he strangled me and nearly killed me in our kitchen with my little baby daughter sitting in her nip-nap chair on the kitchen table. We had no gradual build-up to violence, and we went right from verbal abuse to lethal force. I immediately went into denial. I was so shocked. I said, I pushed him too far. I wanted to believe that because that could not be my life. I had pushed all of my family and friends away in order to be with him. At that point in my life, I had nobody but him. I said to myself, this will never happen again. I will never say what I said. I will never do what I did. And he will never do this again. And we'll be fine. But that was the beginning of the physical abuse. Once that barrier was lifted, he put his hands on me almost every day until the day that I left. When I finally mustered the courage to leave him, this was February of 2000, so I had just turned 30 years old. I sat him down and I said, we need to talk. My little daughters, who were 3 and 4 years old, they were just in their bedroom. And I said, we cannot continue this. We cannot live like this anymore. What is happening between us is not okay. It's not good for us, but it's also not good for the girls. At the time, we were very serious Roman Catholics. I said, we just need to get divorced. We need to figure this out, share custody of the girls, file for an annulment, and move on with our lives because this cannot continue. I remember he was really calm and he leaned forward and he looked at me and he said, if you try and leave me, I will kill you. I will snap your neck like a twig. You will be dead before your body hits the ground, and then I'll kill the girls. I knew he was serious. He had nearly killed me twice before through strangulation. So not long after that, I took my daughters and I ran away. I ran to my brother's home. At the time, we lived in Kenmore, New York. I ran away to Hamburg, New York. That was about 45 minutes away. Because I had not been in contact with my family, I didn't know where my brother lived. I was working as a restaurant manager at the time, and he and his wife and their children had just randomly come into this restaurant one day about a year before, and he was so shocked to see me, and he knew something was really terribly wrong. And he handed me his business card, and he said, if you need me, I'm here. And I remember I tucked that business card away in my wallet. I knew how dangerous that was to keep that because Dorian went through all my things. I didn't have any privacy. But something inside me just said, I'm not letting my brother go again. So I called my brother and I said, I need help. I have to go. This is what's going on. And he let me come and live with him. I've lived in hiding for the duration of the divorce. My bosses, my management team took my situation incredibly seriously. And not all victims are availed that level of help. Many victims have a very difficult time moving forward with their lives, a very difficult time staying gone from their abusers because they don't have economic security. And I was very lucky that the company that I worked for took my economic security seriously. They sent me to a different unit, a unit closer to where I was living, and that management team had me working under an assumed name. So I couldn't manage, but I worked as a waitress, and I was Becky the waitress. And I worked there for the months that I lived in hiding with my daughters, and I was able to save enough money that when the divorce was finally completed, I was able to move out on my own and restart my life. So I was very lucky. I had given birth to my daughter. It was actually our second pregnancy. None of my children were ever planned. I never knew as a woman that I could say no to my partner. And so while I have 3 beautiful children that I love very much, and I always wanted to be a mom, all of my children were surprises. So I was surprised the second time I became pregnant. I had to go back to work because he was not the kind of guy that could keep a job. He was probably a narcissist. Of course, being a narcissist, he didn't want to go to therapy, so I don't have documentation to say that. He didn't always want to work. He couldn't get along with people. He had a very difficult time being out in the world. And so in order to support our little family, I had to go back to work. So I did. Went to my very first doctor's appointment after I had Anna. And my doctor told me I had an issue and I had to take antibiotics. I came home from work after the doctor's appointment, after work. I was exhausted. He had been home all day with her, and I was nursing her. But being on antibiotics, I couldn't nurse, so I had to make bottles. So I'm standing at the kitchen counter, still dressed for work, exhausted, not feeling well, had this prescription that I knew I needed to take, but he was walking her, and he was pacing, and he was saying, if you really loved her, if you really loved God, you would pray to God for a resolution to this infection that you had. Nursing is more important than anything you've got going on. He just kept talking, and he just kept telling me what a bad mom I was, and what a bad person I was, and what a bad Christian I was, and that if only I would just pray hard enough that God would take this infection away from me and I could continue to nurse her. And I got very frustrated with him. I started yelling at him and telling him to leave me alone, that I was exhausted and I was hungry, and I just wanted to take the medicine. I wanted him to walk out of the kitchen just long enough for me to pop one in my mouth and take a drink of water, and I just wanted it to be over, and he just kept grinding. And while he was holding Anna, I pushed him in the shoulder with the palm of my hand. I'm 5'7", 150 pounds. He was 6'2", 280. He was a big guy. He's a big guy, lifted weights. I didn't make it down. I just pushed him. For many years, I thought it was my fault. I thought I was the one that started the physical abuse because I shoved him out of frustration. And he looked at me, and he went over and he put Anna Claire down in her nip-nap chair very calmly. And he turned around and he got me by the throat, and he just started pressing on my windpipe. And he is holding me, and his thumbs are in my windpipe, and he is screaming at me, and he's swearing at me and telling me I'm never going to do that again. And I was losing consciousness. I just thought, this is how it's going to end. My daughter's going to watch me die. But she didn't. While he was strangling me, the look on his face changed. He was calm, and it was almost like he had thought about it before. It was like strangling me wasn't what he thought it was going to be. Killing me was going to be a lot harder than he thought it was going to be. And he stopped, and he turned me around, and he started slamming my head into the kitchen counter. We have bottles of hot water and formula, and he is just slamming me, and the bottles are flying everywhere. Hot water's in my face and my eyes. The grit from that powdered formula is in my face and in my eyes, and he's holding me and slamming my head into the counter, just telling me that this is never going to happen again. My daughter is screaming and crying, and he is just beat red in the face. And then he just dropped me on the floor, and he very calmly took a dish towel, wiped his face, picked her up out of her nip-nap chair, and looked at me as I was lying on the floor and said, "Clean up the mess." And he just walked out of the kitchen. I knew that everything had changed, but I blamed myself for that. And I remember years later, my second husband said to me, "That wasn't your fault. You shoved him. He was yelling at you. You were sick. That one shove doesn't justify years of physical abuse, emotional abuse, religious abuse, financial abuse. It was one shot." But I blamed myself, and that's why it took me so long to want to tell anybody what was going on, because I was ashamed and I was embarrassed, and I thought I had brought it on myself. And victims think that all the time, because that's what the abuser tells them. It's your fault. I wouldn't do what I do if you didn't do what you did. And that's ridiculous. We never bring that on ourselves. Initially, it was emotional abuse. Yelling, swearing, screaming, implying that I wanted to go back to college and learn sign language. I wanted to be a teacher, elementary school teacher, and learn sign language. And he told me I was too stupid. I wasn't smart enough to do that, and I should go for something else. Criticizing my weight, criticizing the way that I dressed, criticizing my friends. He criticized everything. Physical abuse. So pushing, slapping, hitting, pinching, sexual abuse, I didn't know until I was in my 40s. And I started, and I had already written Leaving Dorian, and I was in a second marriage. I had no idea that as a woman I could say no. That's why I have children. And I love them. I always wanted to be a mama, but my babies came along because I didn't believe I had the right to say no. And the very first time I ever had sex with Dorian, he sexually assaulted me. But I didn't know it was sexual assault because I thought that's just what guys did. I thought they just overpowered you. They just did what they wanted to do. And I didn't know. I didn't know until my niece had read the book and said to me, "Oh my God, I was sexually assaulted too." And I was like, "What are you talking about? I wasn't sexually assaulted." And she was like, Aunt Linda, I think you need to reread chapter 6. How would I know? Financial abuse. As I mentioned, he didn't always work, and so I always had to work to make sure that the bills were paid, but I didn't have any control over my own paycheck. My paycheck went into an account. He paid the bills. He had a very confusing idea about what religion and spirituality were for. Much of our money went overseas to religious charities. It was very important to him that he tithe at our church. My daughters and I were wearing used clothing from a used clothing store. He was buying brand new clothes for himself, and the rest of our money was going to religious charities. I didn't have a say in where any of that money went. And to the religious aspect, a lot of people don't know what religious abuse is. And I didn't know until the woman that I dedicated Leaving Dorian to, she was a victim of religious abuse. Her husband murdered her. And when I watched her story, this was 2009, before I had written the book, I watched and I read in the paper what this woman had gone through. And it was exactly what I had gone through. She was Muslim, I was Roman Catholic, but it was exactly the same. Her husband telling her, God doesn't love you, you don't practice your religion properly, and trying to manipulate the way that she practiced her religion. And that is not okay. Religious abuse is a thing. If somebody is telling you you can't practice your religion or you need to practice it more, trying to manipulate the way you pray, trying to manipulate your perception of God, your perception of your spirituality, that's religious abuse. And I wish it was talked about more, because that is also a way, because most religions are patriarchal, that men tend to control women, is through religion, and then also controlling our reproductive rights, because many religions say that the man is in charge and that you can't use birth control or all of these different things, right? So religion, when I realized I had been a victim of religious abuse, it was a tipping point for me. All of the things, all of the problems that I had that I didn't have a label for started to come together, and I realized that what I was suffering from was complex post-traumatic stress disorder, from unresolved childhood trauma, from all of the trauma in that marriage, that first marriage, things that I had not therapied my way out of, because therapy wasn't a thing in my family. My family of origin thought that mental illness was not a thing. And if you went to therapy, it was shameful. My mother was seriously mentally ill, and she was shamed for seeking help, and so I did not seek help, and so I just powered through for more than a decade. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder, paranoia, hypervigilance, trust issues, anger issues. I had an unresolved eating disorder for almost 20 years. I was way too overprotective with my children. I was afraid of everything. There were years that I did not leave the house unless I absolutely had to. I surrounded myself with my children. I got married to my second husband a year to the day that I left Dorian. It was a mistake. I was useful. And he was 10 years older than me. I raised my daughters. I raised his sons, which became like my sons. And then we had a baby together. I got pregnant maybe 3 months after we got married. And it just started all over again. I was the useful person in the house, and I raised my babies and my kiddos, and that fear was just like a black cloud over me for years and years. And Dorian didn't make it any better. Abusers don't just go away, right? Just because the victim is ready to move on doesn't mean that that abuser just throws up his hands and goes, oh, you don't want to be with me anymore? Oh, that's fine. You go ahead, and I'll just go over here and cry in a corner. Dorian stalked me. He harassed me, even though I was remarried, almost 10 years worth. And it wasn't until we did end up getting an annulment that he backed off. But he never backed off my daughters. My daughters endured emotional abuse until he walked out of their lives when they were 14 and 15 years old. When he could no longer emotionally abuse me, he emotionally abused them. And they still are bearing the emotional scars of that to this day. The show Monk, he goes through this terrible tragedy, and then he has all these little behaviors, and he just thinks he's weird. And it's not that he's weird, it's that he's traumatized. Watching that show, I watch every rerun. It is what helped to trigger in my mind, like, there's nothing there. I'm not just a weird person. I've been through something terrible. Like, there's a reason. And then I had to revisit childhood trauma, childhood sexual assault, neglect, emotional abuse, all these things. Watching Monk was something that helped to enlighten me. But I will tell you that it was around 2011 when I started to realize that without therapy I wasn't going to get better, but I still couldn't bring myself to do therapy, and I just thought, my life is over. My kiddos are all going to fly away, and I'm going to be left with my second husband, who found me to be useful, and I just was never going to get better. And so I thought, it's time somebody speaks up, because they had done this spread in the local newspaper of all these women in my county that had been killed by their partners, and I just thought, my God, all of these women are dying at the hands of men who claim to love them. What is happening? Why doesn't somebody speak up? Why doesn't somebody say something? Why doesn't a victim come forward and say, I move forward with my life and you can too? And even though I was really in the pits of despair, my second husband said to me, maybe that's you. Maybe the call is coming from inside the house. So to his credit, he did suggest that to me. And I remember thinking, well, my life is over. I'm never going to be able to move forward. But if my story can help one woman save her own life, you don't have to go through this. I got out, run away, go tell somebody. I thought it would all be worth it. And so I sat down and I wrote Leaving Dorian. I wrote it in 3 months. I just poured my heart out. I just told the truth of what had happened to me, but I had no background. I didn't have the background then that I have now. After studying intimate partner violence for 10 years, I just wrote what happened. And so after I self-published the book, I had 65 publishing houses and agents tell me they didn't want it. Who would read it? And my sister-in-law is a social worker across the state. And I sent it to her after about a year of trying to get this book published. And I said, just if it's terrible, just tell me and I'll just stop trying. She read it in one sitting. And many of my students do. And she called me and she said, you have to find a way to publish this book. It's going to help so many people. She said, I have clients right now that need this book. So I took the leap. I self-published it. I just a month ago was the 10-year anniversary of Leaving Dorian. And so I had a new publication. I have pictures in it, and I have it has a new dedication. So writing the book was terrible. It was heartbreaking, but I knew I had to tell. And I think that's what victims don't understand. The only real power your abuser has over you is your silence. And I know you're ashamed, and I know you're embarrassed, and I know you think nobody's going to believe you, but they will. There are help centers available. Go to a help center, put together a safety plan, and move your life forward. Right? And it is a huge problem. And I do understand why victims are afraid that they're not going to be believed, because I wasn't believed. My own lawyer didn't believe me. Not until my lawyer saw Dorian in court did he say, oh my God, look at this guy. I was paying this guy and he didn't believe me. I had family that came back in my life asked me how I could have let it happen. There is certainly going to be a group of people or a few people that will not believe you. But when you go to a help center and you ask for help and you put together a safety plan, and this is a statistic that is important to remember. 75% of victims who are murdered by their partners are not murdered during the relationship. They are killed either when they try and leave or once they've already left, because abuse is about power and control. And as soon as that abuser realizes he is about to lose control over his victim, even if he has never put his hands on you, he may amp up. And you are in extreme danger when you are preparing to leave and the first year after you're out. So it's very important that you go to trained professionals at a help center, put together a safety plan, and extract yourself from that relationship as safely as you can, because it is dangerous. And I don't say that to be sensational or to strike fear in people, but we want women to live and we want them to be able to mother their children. I had the opportunity to mother my children. My life was not taken from me. And that is our best case scenario. So what finally helped me heal and process the trauma was speaking about what I had gone through. Once the book was published, I started being asked by different people to come speak about it, what I had gone through. And initially, I did not want to. And the first couple of years was torture, because constantly having to scratch open that unhealed wound was terrible. But over time, talking about it, processing it, going through it, also learning about intimate partner violence. I spent 8 years reading. All these professors that I worked with gave me all these suggestions for reading. So while I did not avail myself therapy, working with victims, working with survivors, speaking about my story, reading about intimate partner violence, all of those things came together to help me become a person, a human being with wants and needs and desires, to become a person that could stand up and have boundaries, to become someone who could say, no, I don't like that. I don't want that. I'm not okay with that. I just turned 55. I have only been able to stand up and say no for about 5 years. I don't want other women to wait until they're in their 50s to hold their boundaries, to say no, to find their voice. Do it now. But if you are 55, do it now. It's never too late to move yourself forward and to heal. And just over the last couple of years, I have started therapy. No more shame. I go to therapy. I have a wonderful therapist. She's helping me along. But everybody's going to do what they need to do to heal in their own time. Yeah. So the light at the end of the tunnel for a long time felt like a train coming at me, but not. So unfortunately, my second marriage ended. 19-year marriage ended during COVID. Moved forward. My daughters are grown now. Anna Claire and Gracie, who were 3 and 4 when I left, are in their mid to late 20s now. My youngest child is almost 22. He is wonderful. I have moved my life forward. 10-year anniversary of Leaving Dorian that I mentioned. I also published Finding Chrissy, which is the sequel. Tons of people asked for it. Published that a year and a half ago. I have a wonderful job. I have moved forward and continued my education. And I am in an extremely healthy relationship with my high school sweetheart. We reconnected during COVID. We were 17 and 18 when we dated. And we are together now. And I believe that we're going to make it for the long haul. He's probably the guy I should have been with the whole time. But the guy is not the solution. And the kiddos being happy is not the solution. The solution is me, like I said, becoming a person with boundaries, becoming a person who can move herself forward and take her life where she wants it to be. Without shame, without guilt, without having to explain myself to anybody. I am allowed to do that as a woman, and I will continue to do that. We need men to hold each other accountable, and we need men to change the culture of masculinity, because the shelter movement started in England in 1971, Chiswick, England. And since then, women have raised funds and opened help centers, and we've raised awareness, and we've done marches, and we've worn purple, and we're out there. The men need to stand up and say no more. I guess another statistic, it takes the average victim 7 times to leave and stay gone. So as a friend and family member, if you know that you have a loved one who is enduring abuse and you keep hoping this is gonna be the time, they're gonna leave and they're gonna, they're done. That is not always the case. Please be understanding. Please don't throw up your hands and give up. Also, do not push a victim if she is not ready, because again, once that abuser realizes he's going to lose power and control, it becomes a very dangerous situation for her. And if she's not ready to leave and stay gone, going back could imperil her. And so we don't want that. So we want to be extremely encouraging. We want to make sure we tell her it's not your fault. I believe you. I love you. You didn't bring this on yourself. You're going to be okay. And even if she goes back, you just got to keep trying. You just have to keep loving and supporting. And that can be very difficult to watch a loved one continue to sort of beat their head against this wall, metaphorically, of course, because you want the best for them. But 3 women a day, on average, die as a result of intimate partner violence in America. 3 women a day. It is an epidemic. It is a public health crisis that we are not addressing. And abuse can happen to anyone, right? There's abuse in the LGBTQAI community. There's abuse, teen dating violence, the elderly. Anybody can be a victim of abuse. Highly educated women, doctors, lawyers. It's not just in marginalized communities. It's not just in communities of color. Everybody can be a victim. And men can be victims as well. 92% of victims are women, but men can be victims as well. So let's not think that it's just a problem for women, although largely it is. Men can be victims as well. I said before, I sort of just became a person with boundaries 5 years ago, or, and it started that maybe 10 years ago. Part of the healing process for me was a couple of years back, Dorian passed away. Very unexpectedly. He was only 56 years old. He was not an old man, but I didn't realize how afraid I still was, because abusers come back. When they end an abusive relationship, oftentimes they will go back and try and reoffend every victim before that. And so I never knew where Dorian was in his life, so I never knew if he had relationships that were ending, and I was always afraid. I was always afraid that I was going to open my garage door and he was going to be standing there with a gun, that I was going to go out to my car and he was going to be there. Years I worked, and I never put on social media where I was going to be, because I thought if he comes into that classroom with a gun, he's going to try and kill me, but he's going to end up knocking out some of my students before he gets to me. And I knew I needed to protect the people that I was there working with. So little things like being able to post on social media, I'm going to be at Hobart William Smith College this weekend. It was crazy for me to be able to post it because I didn't have to worry about him showing up. And so I didn't realize how much fear I had lived in, even being married a second time, for all those years, 20 years of just being afraid all the time. But that's over. And sadly for my children, he is gone, but I'm free. And that's a beautiful thing. And it's a shame he had to die for that to happen.